So it became a regular part of my social life, and I was looking at the this thing of the achievement. There was a mention of the what people thought the Góilín achieved in traditional music, and last week I was reading Lilith O'Leary's book, A Rock in the Middle of the Ocean. Really good work, and he made a lot of references to the notion of communitas. The idea of fellow feeling in a group. When people would gather on Tory Island for music and song, there was this strong feeling of communitas. This was a word designated by, I think it was an anthropologist called Pierce Turner. Okay. And he did a lot of study on this development of fellow feeling in a small community. But he designated the term communitas rather than community because a community might be specific to a geographical area, a locality, yeah. But I thought the notion was very interesting because I definitely felt this was something that very much developed in the Góilín, because you had a regular group of people gathering for song, and when the singing was at its height, there was this great bond and feeling of fellow feeling among the group. And a great feeling of what Lilith O'Leary was mentioning, called communitas. So I think that was something that then started with the club, but it has remained consistent. So there's a huge community of singers there, and some don't come in as regularly for a while. Like, for example, in the late 80s, I didn't come in as much. My son Dolan and my daughter Theron were born, and I was working full-time, so I was just too busy. But when you go back in, you get that feeling of belonging and of warmth towards each other. I think Lilith O'Leary mentions the Irish phrase, "Teth or Kela," warm to each other. And I think the Góilín provided that kind of mortar, to build up that kind of warmth between all of the singers, particularly in an urban setting. I mean, you'd get it maybe naturally in Miltown-Malbay or down in Ring, where you have a small geographical community. But in an urban setting, I think the Góilín certainly provided that in the singing world. Now, of course, there are lots of singers' clubs springing up, in Howth and Bray and Song Central and around the country. But at that stage, I think perhaps we were the only specific singers' club in Dublin, certainly. And there weren't many in Ireland, really. So I think Tim Dennehy really pushed that along in the beginning. He put huge work, himself and Donald DeBarra. Well, they were the founders, as you know, and then Luke Cheevers continued it. That kind of establishment of a singing community and the actual idea of belonging to a singing community in Dublin and in urban setting, that definitely was a definite achievement, as regards the Góilín, I think, And also, when I was reading Lilith's book, what struck me was that, a sort of spontaneous communitas arises at certain times. For example, if we have lost a number of singers, as you know, and what has arisen is that after the funeral, when we go to the graveyard, a number of us would sing The Parting Glass, and there's such a strong feeling among the group, of loss, and that kind of spontaneous ritual has evolved, where people gather and sing The Parting Glass, and you can feel such a strong bond with your fellow singers. I think that has arisen. Other groups may do it, but certainly it is something that has arisen in the Góilín. So I remember it particularly so when Maura Delaney died. We lost Maura when she was only a young woman, and the last time I remember it was when Tom Crean died. We were out in Glasnevin. But I think that idea of spontaneous communitas arises. It can arise when there's humorous songs being sung, and it can also arise when there's sad songs being sung. In fact, I remember when I was reading Lillis's book, I was particularly thinking, actually, the last time I did MC at the Góilín, I had invited Grace Toland, and she had sung a couple of songs of loss and separation, and there are a number of people in the club, including herself and myself, who have lost members of our family. And I could sense that sharing of grief among people, among the club, and flowing between the people who, you know, this identification with the people who had a recent tragedy. So it's something which you can't quantify. It's something which arises, you know. So it just creates a bond between groups of people, you know, which is spontaneous and which is very palpable, you know.